My name is Marcus Chen, and last Christmas Eve, I watched my entire family exchange gifts around our dining room table while I sat there empty-handed, invisible as furniture. Not because they forgot, not because there wasn't enough money, but because according to my father, I hadn't earned my place at the adult table yet. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. What they didn't know, what none of them suspected as they unwrapped, their carefully chosen presents and laughed at inside jokes that excluded me, was that in exactly 4 months, every single one of them would be staring at paychecks with my signature at the bottom. I grew up in the kind of family where your worth was measured by your contribution to the family business. Chen Construction had been in our family for 3 generations, passed down from my grandfather to my father, and everyone just assumed it would eventually go to my older brother David. He was the chosen one, the heir apparent, the golden child, who could do no wrong in my father's eyes. David was everything I wasn't. 6'2", built like the construction workers he supervised, with our father's booming voice and natural leadership presence. He'd been working at job sites since he was 16, knew every subcontractor by name, and could read blueprints, like they were comic books. When he walked into a room full of workers, conversations stopped. When I walked in, they barely looked up from their coffee. My younger sister Emma occupied a different category entirely. She was the princess, the one who could charm our parents into anything with a smile and a well-timed compliment. She'd graduated with a business degree and worked in the company's main office, handling client relations and contracts. She had our mother's sharp mind for numbers and our father's gift for making people feel like they were getting a deal, even when they weren't. Then there was me, the middle child who didn't fit the construction mold. At 28, I was still treated like the family disappointment, the one who'd rather spend time with computers than concrete mixers. While David learned to operate heavy machinery, I taught myself coding. While Emma networked at business mixers, I built apps in my bedroom. While they both earned respect and recognition from our parents, I earned nothing but sideways glances and thinly veiled criticism. The exclusion from the gift exchange wasn't new. It was just the latest in a long pattern of being treated like an outsider in my own family. Every year, the 3 core family members, Dad, David, and Emma, would exchange meaningful, expensive gifts that reflected their shared world of construction projects, business deals, and family legacy. Meanwhile, I'd get a generic gift card to Best Buy and a lecture about finding my direction in life. But this year was different. This year, they didn't even bother with the gift card. Marcus doesn't really participate in the family business, my father had announced when I asked about my absence from the gift pile. These presents are for people who contribute to what we've built here. Maybe next year, if you decide to get serious about your future. David had smirked from across the table, unwrapping what looked like an expensive watch. Come on, Dad, give him a break. Not everyone can handle real work. Emma laughed, not cruelly, but with that casual dismissiveness that somehow hurt worse than outright mockery. Marcus lives in his own little world. Don't you, Marcus? With your computers and your apps that no one understands? I sat there, nodding along like their words didn't cut straight through me, like I hadn't spent the last 5 years building something they couldn't even comprehend. Because while they were focused on concrete and contracts, I'd been focused on something bigger, something that would change everything. The family business they were so proud of, the legacy they thought belonged to them, the construction empire they believed would always be theirs to inherit. I'd been quietly positioning myself to own all of it, not through birthright or favoritism, but through something they'd never seen coming: smart acquisitions, strategic partnerships, and a level of business acumen they'd never bothered to notice I possessed. See, while David was learning to pour foundations, I was learning to build financial ones. While Emma was charming clients over lunch, I was studying market trends and investment opportunities. While they both assumed I was wasting my time on computer stuff, I was actually building a portfolio that would make their construction business look like pocket change. The irony was beautiful in its simplicity. They excluded me because they thought I didn't contribute to the family legacy. What they didn't realize was that I was about to become the family legacy. In 4 months, Chen Construction wouldn't be a family business anymore. It would be my business. And David, Emma, and even my father would be working for me. Not because I wanted revenge, though I'd be lying if I said the thought wasn't satisfying, but because sometimes the best way to prove you belong isn't to beg for acceptance. It's to buy the table they wouldn't let you sit at. That Christmas Eve, as I watched them celebrate their tight-knit circle and their shared future, I made myself a promise. I would never again sit at a table where I wasn't wanted. Instead, I'd own the table, the room, and everything else they thought was beyond my reach. The gift exchange ended with hugs and champagne toasts to another successful year for Chen Construction. They talked about upcoming projects, about expansion plans, about the bright future ahead for the family business. I listened to every word, memorizing their confidence, their certainty that tomorrow would look exactly like today, because in exactly 4 months, when they opened their first paycheck signed by Marcus Chen, CEO, everything they thought they knew about our family dynamics would change forever. They had no idea that the quiet, overlooked middle child they'd just excluded from, Christmas had already bought their world out from under them. And unlike their gifts that would be forgotten by New Year's, my surprise would last a lifetime. The exclusion from Christmas gifts wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of 28 years of being treated like a guest in my own family's story. My earliest memory of this dynamic goes back to when I was 12 years old. Our family had just landed the biggest contract in Chen Construction's history, a shopping mall development worth $3 million. Dad threw a celebration dinner at Morton's Steakhouse, the kind of place where the waiters wore ties and the menu didn't have prices. David, then 16, got to sit at the head of the table next to Dad, discussing project timelines and worker schedules like he was already a partner. Emma, only 10 at the time, charmed the entire waitstaff and convinced Dad to let her order the lobster tail. I sat between Mom and Aunt Linda, picking at my chicken while listening to Dad explain to anyone who would listen how David had suggested a cost-saving measure that would save them $40,000 on materials. "The boy's got vision," Dad kept saying, his hand proudly gripping David's shoulder. "Real business instincts." When the waiter asked what I wanted for dessert, I mentioned I'd been working on a computer program that could track construction inventory and predict material needs more efficiently than their current system of handwritten logs. I'd spent 3 months teaching myself database management just to build it. Dad looked at me with that expression I'd come to know well, polite but distant, like I was speaking a foreign language. "That's nice, Marcus. Maybe stick to school stuff for now and let the adults handle business." He turned back to David before I could respond. The waiter brought everyone dessert except me. When I asked about it, Dad said, "We're talking business. Here, go play your video games or whatever." High school was worse. While David earned varsity letters in football and wrestling, making Dad beam with pride at every game, I was building websites for local businesses and earning more money at 15 than most adults in our town made in part-time jobs. I created an e-commerce platform for Peterson's hardware store that increased their sales by 300% in 6 months. I designed a customer management system for the local veterinary clinic that streamlined their entire operation. None of it mattered to my family. At my high school graduation, while other parents celebrated their kids' achievements, Dad spent the entire ceremony on his phone coordinating a job site crisis. When they called my name for graduating summa cum laude, he was outside arguing with a concrete supplier. I walked across that stage to scattered applause from strangers while my own father negotiated rebar prices in the parking lot. Emma's graduation 3 years later was different. Dad took the entire day off, brought flowers, and threw a party at the house afterward. She'd graduated with a B average and a business degree, which Dad called exactly what our company needs. I'd graduated with a computer science degree from Northwestern on a full academic scholarship, which Dad called a nice hobby that might come in handy someday. The summer after college, I moved back home temporarily while looking for work in Chicago. Every morning, David would leave for job sites with Dad, their coffee cups steaming as they discussed the day's plans. Emma would head to the office, her business suits crisp and professional, carrying herself like someone important. And I would sit at the kitchen table with my laptop, applying for tech jobs and building freelance projects, invisible to the family bustling around me. "Marcus is still figuring things out," Mom would tell visitors, as if I were some lost teenager instead of a 22-year-old with a degree and actual work experience. "He's very smart with computers, but you know how it is with creative types." Creative types. Like what I did was finger painting instead of complex problem solving that could revolutionize entire industries. The breaking point that summer came during the annual Chen Construction Barbecue, an event Dad hosted every year for employees, subcontractors, and their families. It was his way of showing off the company's success and maintaining relationships that kept business flowing. The backyard would fill with 200 people, all of them connected to the construction world that defined our family's identity. Was manning the drink station, refilling coolers and making sure everyone had cold beer, when I overheard a conversation that crystallized everything I'd been feeling for years. Dad was talking to Mike Rodriguez, the owner of Rodriguez Electrical, one of their biggest subcontractors. "David's really stepping up," Dad was saying, gesturing toward my brother, who was holding court near the pool with a group of foremen. "Kid's got the touch. Natural leader, just like his old man. And Emma's handling our client relations like a pro. She's got that Chen charm, you know, makes everyone feel like family." Mike nodded, sipping his beer. "You're lucky, Tom, having kids who want to carry on the legacy. Not everyone gets that." "Tell me about it," Dad replied. "We've got Marcus too, of course, but he's different. Smart kid, don't get me wrong, but not really cut out for this world. He's more of a behind-the-scenes type. Computers and all that technical stuff. Behind-the-scenes type." The words hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't even a secondary character in my own family's story. I was a footnote, an afterthought, someone who existed in the margins of their real lives. I set down the beer I was holding and walked away from the party. Nobody noticed me leave. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. That night, sitting in my childhood bedroom surrounded by computer equipment and programming books that my family saw as toys rather than tools, I made a decision that would change everything. If they couldn't see my value as a son, maybe they'd understand it as an owner. I spent the rest of that summer not just applying for jobs, but researching every aspect of the construction industry. I studied market trends, analyzed competitor strengths and weaknesses, and identified opportunities that traditional construction companies were missing. While my family slept, I built financial models and investment strategies. While they planned their next residential development, I planned my next move. The tech job I eventually landed in Chicago wasn't just a career move. It was the first step in a larger strategy that would take years to execute, but would ultimately put me in control of everything they thought belonged to them. Because the thing about being invisible is that people stop watching what you're doing. They assume you're not doing anything important. They dismiss your activities as hobbies or distractions, never realizing that what looks like aimless tinkering might actually be careful, methodical preparation for something they never saw coming. For 5 years, I let them think I was just Marcus the computer guy, the family member who didn't quite fit, the one who would always need someone else to make the real decisions. And for 5 years, I used their dismissal as cover while I built something bigger than anything they could imagine. The beautiful irony was that their construction business, the thing they were so proud of, the legacy they thought would always define our family's success, was about to become just one small part of something much larger. something I owned, something that would make them employees instead of employers. They'd excluded me from their world for so long that they'd forgotten to watch what world I was building for myself. The moment that changed everything happened on a Tuesday morning in September, 3 months before that Christmas dinner. I was visiting the family office to drop off some tax documents Mom needed when I walked into a conversation that wasn't meant for my ears. The Chen construction headquarters occupied the ground floor of a strip mall Dad had developed 15 years earlier. Glass windows displayed architectural models of completed projects, and the reception area showcased framed photos of shopping centers, office buildings, and residential developments that bore the Chen construction signature. It was Dad's shrine to his own success, and walking through those doors always felt like entering a museum dedicated to a family legacy I wasn't part of. I pushed through the entrance expecting to find Mom at the front desk, but instead heard raised voices coming from the conference room. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap I could see Dad, David, and Emma huddled around the mahogany table that dominated the space. Financial documents were spread across the surface, and Emma was pointing at numbers on her laptop screen. "We're looking at a 20% revenue drop if we lose the Riverside project," Emma was saying, her voice tight with concern. "That's $800,000 in lost income, and we've already committed to the equipment leases." Dad ran his hands through his graying hair, a gesture I recognized from childhood whenever he was stressed about money. "The client's getting cold feet because Morrison Construction underbid us by $200,000. They're using some new project management software that cuts their overhead costs." David leaned back in his chair, frustration evident in his posture. "Technology again. These software companies are ruining the industry. Projects that used to require experience and relationships now get handed to whoever has the fanciest computer program." "It's not just software," Emma replied, scrolling through more data. "Morrison's entire operation is different. They're using AI for cost estimation, drone surveys for site analysis, and some kind of predictive modeling that lets them bid more aggressively while maintaining profit margins. We're competing with robots." The irony was so perfect it almost made me laugh. Here was my family, struggling with exactly the kind of technological disruption I'd been preparing for my entire career, and they were discussing it like it was some mysterious force beyond their comprehension. Dad stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the parking lot where his pickup truck sat next to David's identical model. 30 years I've been building this business on handshake deals and quality work. Now clients want apps and algorithms instead of experience and trust." "Maybe we need to adapt," Emma suggested carefully. "Hire some tech consultants, modernize our systems. Other companies are doing it successfully," David scoffed. "And pay some 25-year-old kid with no construction experience to tell us how to run our business? No thanks. We're builders, not programmers." That's when Dad said the words that crystallized everything for me. "Besides, who are we going to trust with something that important? It's not like we have someone in the family who understands this tech stuff." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma shifted uncomfortably in her chair, and David suddenly became very interested in studying the architectural blueprints on the wall. They all knew exactly who in the family understood this tech stuff, but acknowledging it would require admitting they'd been wrong about me for decades. I stood there in the doorway, invisible as always, holding tax documents for a business that was slowly dying because it refused to acknowledge the one family member who could save it, the same family member they'd excluded from Christmas presents because he didn't contribute to the family business. Mom appeared beside me, returning from the break room with a cup of coffee. She saw me standing there and opened her mouth to announce my arrival, but I held up my hand and shook my head silently. She looked confused but stayed quiet. "We need options," Dad continued, his back still to the door. "Real solutions, not expensive consultants who'll take our money and disappear. This is our livelihood we're talking about. Everything we've built is at stake." Emma pulled up another spreadsheet. "I've been running projections," If we lose 3 more projects to tech-enabled competitors, we'll have to lay off half our crew by spring. And if we can't adapt to these new industry standards within 18 months, we might not survive at all. The weight of what I was hearing settled over me like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about being excluded from family celebrations or dismissed as the family oddball. This was about survival. My family's business, the thing they valued above everything else, was in real danger of failing because they couldn't embrace the very expertise I'd been developing my entire adult life. For a moment, I considered walking into that room and offering to help. I could solve their technology problems in a matter of weeks. I had connections with software companies, experience with AI implementation, and knowledge of predictive modeling that could revolutionize their entire operation. I could save Chen Construction and finally earn the respect and recognition I'd been seeking for 28 years. But then David spoke again, and my moment of sympathy evaporated instantly. "You know what the real problem is?" he said, gesturing broadly at the financial documents. "We've spent too much time worrying about keeping up with trends instead of focusing on what made us successful in the first place. This family built something real, something solid. We don't need to change who we are to compete with companies that rely on gimmicks." Dad nodded approvingly. "David's right. We stick to our strengths: quality work, reliable service, family values. That means something in this business. Family values." The phrase hit me like a slap across the face. These people who excluded me from gift exchanges and treated me like an unwanted houseguest were talking about family values while their business crumbled around them because they refused to value the one family member who could actually help. I stepped away from the door and walked quietly back to the reception area, setting Mom's tax documents on her desk. When she followed me out and asked if I needed anything, I told her no, that I was just dropping off paperwork. But that wasn't true. I was dropping off more than paperwork. I was dropping off any remaining obligation I felt to save them from their own stubbornness. That night, I made 3 phone calls that would change everything. The first was to Rebecca Martinez, a venture capital partner I'd met at a tech conference 2 years earlier. The second was to James Patterson, a private equity specialist who specialized in traditional industry acquisitions. The third was to my lawyer, Catherine Williams, who helped me establish the corporate structure I'd need for what I was planning. If my family couldn't see my value as a son, they'd learn to respect it as their boss. If they wouldn't accept my help as a family member, they'd have no choice but to accept my authority as their owner. The plan I'd been developing for years suddenly had urgency and purpose. Chen Construction was vulnerable, bleeding money, and losing market share to exactly the kind of technological innovation I specialized in. They needed a savior, and they were about to get one. They just didn't know that their savior would be the family member they'd spent decades treating like he didn't matter. Over the next 3 months, while they struggled with declining revenues and increasing competition, I would be positioning myself to buy not just their business, but their entire professional future. And unlike their gift exchange, where I was excluded from receiving anything, this time I would be the one deciding what everyone else got. The irony was beautiful. They were about to learn that the family member they'd never valued was about to become the most valuable thing in their lives. The first step in acquiring my family's business wasn't about construction or technology. It was about becoming someone they couldn't ignore, even if they never saw it coming. My day job at TechFlow Solutions in downtown Chicago became the perfect cover for what I was really building. While my colleagues thought I was just another senior software architect designing enterprise applications, I was actually using my position to forge connections that would make my family acquisition possible. Every client meeting, every industry conference, every late-night coding session was secretly laying groundwork for something much larger. TechFlow specialized in digital transformation for traditional industries, which meant I spent my days inside. Companies exactly like Chen Construction, family-owned businesses struggling to compete with tech-enabled competitors. I became an expert in their pain points, their blind spots, and most importantly, their financial vulnerabilities. Every consulting project taught me new ways that traditional businesses failed to adapt, and every failure I witnessed became a lesson I could apply to my own strategy. The breakthrough came 6 weeks after overheard conversation in the conference room. I was working with Midwest Manufacturing, a third-generation steel fabrication company whose patriarch reminded me uncomfortably of my father. They were losing contracts to competitors using automated bidding systems and predictive analytics, just like Chen Construction was losing to Morrison. During a strategy session, the company's CFO mentioned they were considering selling to a private equity firm rather than continuing to fight technological disruption they didn't understand. "We're builders, not programmers," he said, echoing David's exact words from weeks earlier. "Maybe it's time to let someone else worry about the future while we focus on what we do best." That phrase, "let someone else worry about the future," sparked an idea that would become the foundation of my entire plan. Instead of trying to force my family to accept my help directly, I would become that someone else they would eventually have to turn to for survival. I spent the next month creating a detailed acquisition model specifically for Chen Construction, using financial data I'd memorized from years of family dinners where business was discussed openly around the unimportant family member. I built projections showing exactly how the company's current trajectory would lead to bankruptcy within 2 years without significant technological intervention. The numbers were worse than I'd expected. Chen Construction's profit margins had been declining for 3 years. Their client retention rate was down 18%, and their average project value was shrinking as competitors underbid them consistently. They were a textbook case of disruption-driven decline, and they had no idea how serious their situation had become. But I also saw something my family couldn't: massive untapped potential. Chen Construction had 30 years of client relationships, a reputation for quality work, and operational expertise that technology could amplify rather than replace. In the right hands, my hands, the company could become a regional powerhouse by combining their traditional strengths with cutting-edge innovation. The financial strategy I developed was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than attempting a hostile takeover, I would position myself as their savior by creating a series of seemingly unrelated business successes that would establish my credibility as an industry leader. Then, when their situation became desperate enough, I would appear as the perfect solution to their problems. Phase 1 involved building my own consulting practice on the side. Using connections from TechFlow, I began offering digital transformation services to small construction companies, always working evenings and weekends to avoid any conflict of interest with my day job. My first client was Riverside Builders, a residential contractor who was losing bids to companies using drone surveying and AI cost estimation. Within 3 months, I'd implemented a comprehensive technology stack that reduced their bidding time by 70% and improved their profit margins by 12%. Word spread quickly in the tight-knit construction community, and soon I had more clients than I could handle working part-time. The irony was perfect. While my family struggled with technological disruption they couldn't understand, I was becoming known throughout the Chicago construction scene as the go-to expert for exactly the solutions they needed. Contractors who'd never heard of Marcus Chen were recommending my services to colleagues, creating a reputation that would eventually reach my family's ears. Phase 2 involved strategic networking. I joined the Illinois Construction Industry Association, attended every regional conference, and systematically built relationships with the suppliers, subcontractors, and clients who formed the ecosystem around Chen Construction. I never mentioned my family connection, instead introducing myself simply as Marcus Chen, technology consultant specializing in construction industry innovation. At the annual Midwest Building Expo, I delivered a presentation titled Traditional Values, Modern Methods, How family businesses can compete in the digital age. The room was packed with third-generation contractors facing the same challenges my father wrestled with daily. I spoke their language, understood their values, and offered solutions that enhanced rather than replaced their core competencies. After the presentation, Mike Rodriguez approached me. The same Mike Rodriguez who'd attended our family barbecues. For years, who'd watched me grow up as Tom Chen's computer kid. He didn't recognize me. 5 years of professional development, a well-tailored suit, and the confidence that comes from actual expertise had transformed me into someone completely different from the awkward college graduate he remembered. Outstanding presentation, he said, shaking my hand. My company's been struggling with exactly these issues. Do you have a card? I handed him my business card, and he studied it carefully. Marcus Chen, he read aloud. Any relation to Tom Chen from Chen Construction? Distant cousin, I replied smoothly. Different sides of the family entirely. We don't really stay in touch. The lie came easily because it felt emotionally true. The Marcus Chen who'd been excluded from Christmas gifts and dismissed as a behind-the-scenes type was indeed a distant relation to the Marcus Chen who was revolutionizing construction businesses across the Midwest. Over the following months, my reputation grew exponentially. I helped Precision Concrete implement automated scheduling that increased their project completion rate by 25%. I designed a customer relationship management system for gateway development that improved their client satisfaction scores and generated 15% more repeat business. I built predictive maintenance algorithms for industrial roofing solutions that reduced their equipment downtime by 40%. Each success story spread through the construction community like ripples in a pond, eventually reaching contractors, who knew my family personally. At industry gatherings, I would overhear conversations about this young consultant who was helping traditional companies compete with tech-enabled competitors. Some mentioned wanting to introduce him to Tom Chen, whose business could really benefit from that kind of expertise. The final phase of my preparation involved assembling the financial resources necessary for acquisition. The success of my consulting practice had generated significant capital, but buying an established construction company would require serious investment banking. This is where my relationships with Rebecca Martinez and James Patterson became crucial. Rebecca's venture capital firm specialized in technology-enabled acquisitions of traditional businesses. She was immediately interested in the Chen Construction opportunity, especially when I explained the potential for scaling my proven methodologies across a larger operation. James Patterson's private equity firm provided the additional capital structure needed for a full acquisition. Together, we created an investment vehicle specifically designed to purchase and modernize family-owned construction businesses throughout the Midwest, with Chen Construction as our flagship acquisition target. By December, everything was in place. I had established myself as a respected industry expert, built the financial backing necessary for acquisition, and positioned myself as the obvious solution to exactly the problems my family was facing. All that remained was waiting for them to become desperate enough to accept help from the family member they'd never valued. That desperation was coming sooner than they realized. The acquisition happened on a snowy Thursday in February, exactly 6 weeks after that Christmas dinner where I sat empty-handed while my family exchanged gifts. While they were dealing with their worst quarter in company history, I was signing documents that made me the majority owner of everything they thought belonged to them. The beautiful thing about distressed asset acquisition is that desperate sellers rarely investigate their buyers as thoroughly as they should. When Chen Construction's bank called in their line of credit due to declining revenues and missed payments, my family panicked. Dad spent sleepless nights calling every potential investor he could think of, while David and Emma scrambled to find emergency funding that would keep the business operational. What they didn't know was that I had been orchestrating their financial pressure for months. Through my consulting network, I had quietly influenced 3 major clients to delay their payments to Chen Construction by offering them better terms if they switched to contractors I recommended. I convinced Rodriguez Electrical to pause their subcontracting relationship with my family's company by connecting them with more profitable opportunities through my other clients. I even arranged for Morrison Construction to aggressively underbid on every project Chen Construction pursued, knowing I could absorb those temporary losses through my investment backing. None of this was illegal or even unusual in the competitive construction industry. It was simply strategic business maneuvering designed to create the exact financial crisis that would force a sale. My family had spent years dismissing me as someone who didn't understand business. Now I was demonstrating a level of business sophistication they couldn't even recognize. The call came on a Tuesday morning in early February. Dad's voice was strained when he reached me at my Chicago office, and I could hear the desperation he was trying to hide behind forced casualness. "Marcus, I know we don't talk business much, but I wanted to let you know we're exploring some investment opportunities for the company, bringing in outside capital to help us expand and modernize." Translation: they were hours away from bankruptcy and willing to sell to anyone who could prevent complete collapse. "That sounds interesting, Dad. What kind of investment are you looking for?" "Well, we need about $2 million in immediate capital, plus another $1 million for operational improvements. The bank is requiring us to bring in a majority investor as part of the refinancing agreement. $2 million for a company that had been valued at $8 million just 3 years earlier. The desperation pricing was exactly what I'd been waiting for. "Have you found any interested investors yet?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "We're talking to several groups, but most of them want to completely change how we operate. Bring in new management, implement all this technology stuff we don't understand. We're looking for someone who appreciates what we've built and wants to preserve the family aspects of the business." The irony was so perfect I had to turn away from my phone to smile. They wanted someone who appreciated what they'd built while preserving family aspects, and they were talking to the family member they'd excluded from their definition of family for 28 years. "You know, Dad, I might know someone who could help. I've been working with an investment group that specializes in traditional family businesses. They understand the value of preserving company culture while implementing strategic improvements." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Dad spoke, his voice heavy with reluctance. "Marcus, I appreciate the thought, but this is pretty serious business. We need investors with real experience in our industry, not just... we need people who understand construction." There it was again. The casual dismissal, the assumption that anything I touched couldn't be serious or important enough for their attention. Even facing bankruptcy, he couldn't imagine that I might be connected to anything valuable. Actually, this group specializes in construction industry acquisitions. They've successfully modernized 12 family-owned construction companies in the past 3 years, all while maintaining the original ownership families in key operational roles. I wasn't lying. Chen Industries, the investment vehicle I'd created, with Rebecca and James, had indeed acquired and modernized 12 construction companies. The fact that I was the driving force behind all of those acquisitions wasn't something Dad needed to know yet. 3 days later, I sat across from my father, David, and Emma in their conference room as Marcus Chen, senior partner with Chen Industries. I wore a charcoal gray suit that cost more than David's monthly salary, carried a leather briefcase that contained documents outlining their complete financial salvation, and spoke with the confidence of someone who held their entire future in his hands. They didn't recognize me. Oh, they knew who I was, of course, but the person sitting across from them bore no resemblance to the awkward family disappointment they'd excluded from Christmas gifts just weeks earlier. This was a polished business executive who commanded respect through expertise and authority, rather than begging for acceptance through family connection. I had become someone they couldn't dismiss, ignore, or exclude. I had become someone they needed. Chen Industries has reviewed your financial statements and operational metrics, I said, spreading documents across the mahogany table where they'd once discussed my irrelevance to the family business. We're prepared to offer immediate capital injection of $3 million, plus an additional $2 million in operational improvement funding in exchange for 65% equity ownership. Emma's eyes widened. Dad leaned forward. David actually took notes. The terms are favorable, I continued. Existing management remains in place. All current employees retain their positions. Family leadership structure stays intact. The only changes involve implementing proven technological improvements that will increase efficiency and profitability. What kind of technological improvements? David asked, his tone respectful rather than dismissive for the first time in our lives. Opened my laptop and displayed a presentation I'd been preparing for years. Automated project management systems that reduce scheduling conflicts by 40%. AI-powered cost estimation that improves bidding accuracy by 25%. Predictive maintenance protocols that decrease equipment downtime by 30%. Customer relationship management platforms that increase repeat business by 15%. The same technological solutions they'd been dismissing as gimmicks suddenly sounded like salvation when presented by someone they perceived as a serious business professional rather than their irrelevant family member. These metrics are impressive, Emma said, studying the financial projections. What's your experience with construction industry implementations? We've successfully deployed these systems across 12 companies similar to yours. Average revenue, increase of 38% within 18 months, with profit margin improvements averaging 22%. All true. All accomplished under my direct supervision. All expertise they'd had access to for free through family connection but had chosen to ignore. Dad cleared his throat. Mr. Chen, these terms are generous. Almost too generous. What's your primary interest in our company specifically? Chen Construction has excellent market positioning, strong client relationships, and proven operational expertise. With proper technological integration, this company could dominate the regional market within 3 years. We see tremendous untapped potential. When would you need our decision? Emma asked. The offer expires Friday at close of business. After that, we'll pursue other acquisition opportunities in your market segment. The pressure was real. Morrison Construction had indicated interest in a distressed asset purchase that would effectively eliminate Chen Construction as a competitor. My family could accept my terms, or they could face complete business failure within 60 days. We'll need time to discuss this as a family, Dad said. Of course, take all the time you need. I packed my briefcase with the same calm professionalism I'd displayed throughout the meeting, shook hands with each of them, and walked out of the building I would own by Friday afternoon. That night, I sat in my Boston condo looking out at the city skyline, knowing that everything was about to change. In 3 days, I would officially become the boss of the people who'd spent 28 years treating me like I didn't matter. They still had no idea who their savior really was. The phone call came exactly when I expected it would. Friday morning, 9:47 a.m., just 13 minutes before my acquisition offer was set to expire. Dad's voice carried a mixture of relief and resignation that told me everything I needed to know before he spoke a single word. Marcus, we've decided to accept Chen Industries' proposal. Can you arrange a meeting with your investor group to finalize the paperwork? Absolutely. How about Monday morning at 10? We can meet at their offices to sign the final documents. Perfect. And Marcus, thank you for connecting us with these people. I know we haven't always supported your career choices, but you really came through for the family when we needed it. The family. After 28 years of being excluded, dismissed, and forgotten, I was suddenly part of the family again because I'd brought them salvation they didn't know came from me. Of course, Dad. Family helps family, right? The weekend passed slowly. I spent Saturday reviewing the final acquisition documents, making sure every detail was perfect. Sunday, I drove to Boston to clear my head and prepare for the most important moment of my life. Monday morning would be the culmination of years of planning, months of strategic maneuvering, and decades of proving I was worthy of respect I should have received simply by being born into this family. Monday arrived with spring sunshine that felt like an omen. I reached the Chen construction offices at 9:30 a.m., 30 minutes before the scheduled meeting, and parked across the street where I could watch my family arrive for what they thought was their business salvation. David pulled up first in his pickup truck, wearing the same style of dark jeans and company polo shirt he'd worn to every business meeting since college. He carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world, never questioned whether he belonged at the table where decisions were made. Emma arrived 5 minutes later in her silver Honda Accord, looking professional in a navy blazer and carrying the leather portfolio Dad had given her when she joined the company. She moved with purpose, like someone handling important business, someone whose opinions mattered and whose contributions were valued. Dad was last, driving the company Ford F-150 that had served as his mobile office for 15 years. He parked in his reserved spot next to the building entrance, straightened his tie in the rearview mirror, and took a deep breath before getting out. For the first time in my memory, my father looked nervous about a business meeting. I waited until they were all inside before crossing the street and entering the building that would officially become mine in approximately 20 minutes. The conference room was arranged exactly as I'd specified. Rebecca Martinez sat at the head of the table, her briefcase open and documents neatly organized. James Patterson occupied the chair to her right, his laptop displaying the final acquisition agreement. 2 additional chairs were positioned across from my family, one for the lawyer Catherine Williams and one for the senior partner who would be signing on behalf of Chen Industries. My family sat clustered together on the opposite side, looking smaller somehow than they had during our Christmas dinner 2 months earlier. The weight of potential bankruptcy and business failure had diminished their usual confidence, replaced it with the careful politeness of people who needed something they couldn't provide for themselves. "Good morning," Rebecca said as I entered the room. "Mr. Chen, thank you for joining us. I believe you've met the Chen construction leadership team?" "We've had some preliminary discussions," I replied, taking my seat directly across from Dad. "I'm looking forward to formalizing our partnership." Dad extended his hand across the table. "Tom Chen, company founder and current CEO. This is my son David, our operations manager, and my daughter Emma, who handles client relations and financial oversight." I shook each of their hands, maintaining eye contact with the professional courtesy I'd learned in corporate boardrooms far from the family dinner table where I'd been invisible. "The terms are straightforward," James began, distributing signature pages. "Chen Industries acquires 65% equity ownership in exchange for $5 million in capital injection and operational improvements. Existing management structure remains intact, with Tom Chen continuing as CEO, David Chen as operations manager, and Emma Chen as client relations director." "What about the reporting structure?" Emma asked. "Who do we answer to for major decisions?" Rebecca smiled. "You'll be working directly with our senior partner, who will serve as chairman of the board and oversee strategic direction. He has extensive experience in construction industry operations and will be your primary point of contact." "When do we meet this senior partner?" Dad asked. "Actually," I said, reaching into my briefcase and removing a business card, "you've already met him." I slid the card across the mahogany table, watching their faces as they read the name printed in elegant black lettering. Marcus Chen, chairman and senior partner, Chen Industries. The silence that followed was absolute. Dad's mouth opened slightly, then closed without sound. Emma's eyes moved from the business card to my face and back again, like she was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. David's expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something approaching shock. "This is some kind of joke," David finally said, his voice tight with disbelief. "I assure you it's not," Rebecca replied smoothly. "Marcus has been our lead partner on this acquisition from the beginning. He identified Chen Construction as an ideal target for our investment strategy." Dad found his voice, though it came out, smaller than usual. Marcus, I don't understand. You work for a software company in Chicago. You're not an investor. I work for TechFlow Solutions, yes. But I also founded and operate Chen Industries, which specializes in technology-enabled acquisitions of traditional construction companies. This isn't my first purchase, Dad. It's my 12th. Emma leaned forward, studying the document spread across the table. You're telling us that our brother, is the investor group that's buying our company? 65% of it, yes. Though I prefer to think of it as saving the company from bankruptcy while positioning it for unprecedented growth. The transformation in their expressions was fascinating to watch. The polite deference they'd shown to the mysterious senior partner from Chen Industries evaporated, replaced by the familiar dismissiveness I'd lived with my entire life. This is ridiculous, David said, his voice rising. You can't just walk in here pretending to be some big-shot investor. We know who you are, Marcus. You're the computer guy who couldn't handle real work. I'm the computer guy who just bought your real work, I replied calmly. Dad's face had gone pale. How is this possible? Where did you get $5 million? From the same place I got the expertise to increase construction company revenues by an average of 38%. From the same place I got the industry connections to help 12 family businesses avoid bankruptcy. From working, Dad. From building something real while you were dismissing it as unimportant. Wait, Emma said, pieces clicking together in her mind. The consultant everyone's been talking about. The one who's been helping companies compete with Morrison Construction. That's you? Marcus Chen, technology consultant specializing in construction. Industry innovation. I've been working in your market for 3 years, Dad. I've been saving companies exactly like yours while you struggled with problems I could have solved for free. The weight of realization was settling over them like a heavy blanket. They were beginning to understand that the family member they'd excluded from Christmas gifts was the same person they'd just signed over their life's work to. You planned this, Dad said, his voice barely above a whisper. You orchestrated our financial problems so you could buy us out. I positioned myself to help when you needed it most. The financial problems were entirely of your own making. I just recognized the opportunity and prepared to capitalize on it. This is insane, David said, standing up abruptly. We're not going through with this. You're our brother, not our boss. Actually, Catherine Williams interjected, the documents have already been signed and filed. As of 15 minutes ago, Marcus Chen legally owns 65% of Chen Construction. The capital transfer is already complete. Emma looked down at the signature page in front of her, her own handwriting still wet from the pen. We signed it before we knew. You signed it because you needed it, I said. Because your business was failing and you had no other options. Because after 30 years of building something you were proud of, you couldn't save it yourselves. Dad's shoulders sagged. What happens now? The acquisition of Chen Construction had given me something more valuable than revenge or vindication. It has given me the confidence that comes from knowing I could succeed independently, the peace that comes from choosing my own path, and the freedom that comes from no longer needing anyone else's permission to be who I was meant to be. As the second year progressed, our business empire continued expanding. We acquired 2 additional construction companies, launched a software development division, and established partnerships with major architectural firms throughout the region. Chen Industries became a case study taught in business schools, a success story featured in industry publications, and a model for family business modernization that other companies attempted to replicate. But the most meaningful measure of success wasn't our financial growth or industry recognition. It was the quality of relationships we'd built along the way. My partnership with Rebecca Martinez evolved into a lasting professional alliance that extended far beyond our original acquisition. Her venture capital firm became the primary funding source for Chen Industries' expansion, and her strategic guidance helped us navigate challenges that could have derailed our growth. James Patterson's private equity expertise proved invaluable as we structured additional acquisitions and developed the financial systems necessary for managing multiple business divisions. His network of industry contacts opened doors that would have taken years to access independently. Most importantly, I found that success shared with others was more fulfilling than success achieved in isolation. The employees whose jobs I'd saved through the Chen Construction acquisition became the foundation of a company culture that valued innovation, collaboration, and continuous improvement. Many of them contributed ideas that improved our operations in ways I never could have developed alone. The family relationships that had been strained by years of misunderstanding gradually healed and evolved into something stronger than they'd ever been before. Dad became not just my father, but a trusted advisor whose operational experience perfectly complemented my technological expertise. David became not just my brother, but a valued partner whose understanding of construction realities kept my innovations grounded in practical application. Emma became not just my sister, but a close collaborator whose business insights helped translate our technological capabilities into client value. But perhaps the most unexpected development was my relationship with Mom, who had witnessed our family dynamics for decades without being able to change them. As our business success brought the family together in new ways, she finally felt free to express pride in all her children equally. For the first time in my memory, family gatherings became celebrations of collective achievement rather than competitions for individual recognition. The transformation extended beyond business success into personal fulfillment. With the financial security and professional recognition I'd always sought, I was free to pursue interests that had nothing to do with proving my worth to anyone else. I began traveling internationally, learning languages, developing hobbies that challenged me in ways completely unrelated to business or technology. I started a foundation that provided technology education to underserved communities, combining my expertise with my desire to help others avoid the kind of exclusion I'd experienced. The foundation offered coding boot camps, digital literacy programs, and entrepreneurship workshops designed to give people the tools they needed to create their own opportunities rather than waiting for others to recognize their potential. Most significantly, I began developing relationships based on mutual interest and compatibility rather than family obligation or business necessity. The confidence that came from knowing I could succeed independently made it easier to connect with others authentically, without the defensiveness or need for validation that had complicated my earlier attempts at friendship and romance. 2 years. After the acquisition, I met Dr. Jennifer Walsh at a technology conference in San Francisco. She was a research scientist specializing in artificial intelligence applications for industrial automation, and our initial conversation about machine learning algorithms evolved into discussions about philosophy, travel, literature, and the kind of future we wanted to build together. Jennifer appreciated my success without being impressed by it, understood my ambitions without being intimidated by them, and challenged my thinking without trying to change my fundamental nature. For the first time in my life, I was in a relationship with someone who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide or prove. Our relationship developed naturally, without the strategic planning that had characterized my business endeavors. We traveled together, worked on projects together, and built a partnership based on mutual respect and shared values rather than need or convenience. When I told her about my family dynamics and the acquisition story, she was more interested in my personal growth than my business success. "The most impressive thing isn't that you bought your family's company," she said during a weekend trip to Napa Valley. "It's that you found a way to forgive them while still maintaining your boundaries. That takes more strength than any business deal." Her perspective helped me understand that my journey had been about more than professional achievement or family recognition. It had been about learning to value myself independently of others' opinions, while still maintaining the capacity for meaningful relationships. It had been about proving my worth without becoming bitter about those who'd failed to recognize it earlier. As I write this, 3 years have passed since that Christmas dinner where I sat empty-handed while my family exchanged gifts. Chen Industries now employs over 400 people across 6 divisions, generates annual revenue exceeding $50 million, and has been recognized as one of the fastest-growing companies in the Midwest construction industry. But those metrics, impressive as they might be, aren't the real measure of what I've accomplished. The real measure is simpler and more profound. I no longer need anyone else's validation to know my own worth. I no longer wait for others to recognize my potential before pursuing my goals. I no longer allow other people's limitations to define my possibilities. The family that once excluded me from gift exchanges now depends on my leadership for their professional success, but that dependence isn't what makes me proud. What makes me proud is that I've used my position of authority to create opportunities for everyone around me, including the family members who once dismissed my potential. Dad's salary has tripled since the acquisition, and he's gained industry recognition as a leader in construction innovation. David has been promoted to Vice President of Operations and regularly speaks at conferences about successful integration of traditional craftsmanship with modern technology. Emma has become Director of Strategic Development and is completing an MBA program that Chen Industries is funding. All of them are more successful now than they ever would have been without the changes I implemented. All of them have benefited from the expertise they once dismissed as irrelevant. All of them have learned to appreciate capabilities they once failed to recognize. But the greatest benefit hasn't been their professional advancement. It's been the restoration of family relationships based on mutual respect rather than conditional acceptance. We've learned to value each other's contributions without requiring anyone to diminish themselves to make others feel important. We've discovered that supporting each other's success creates more prosperity than competing for limited recognition. The lesson I'd want to share with anyone who's felt overlooked, dismissed, or excluded by the people who should have valued them most is this: you don't have to choose between maintaining relationships and maintaining your self-respect. You don't have to abandon your goals to keep peace with people who don't support them. You don't have to shrink yourself to make others comfortable with their own limitations. What you can do is build something so undeniably valuable that it becomes impossible to ignore, while remaining open to the possibility that relationships can evolve when people are ready to grow. You can prove your worth without becoming vindictive about those who failed to recognize it initially. You can succeed independently while still creating space for others to benefit from your success. The most powerful position isn't being right about people who wronged you. It's being successful enough that their past behavior becomes irrelevant to your future happiness. It's being confident enough in your own abilities that you can afford to be generous with people who weren't generous with you. It's being secure enough in your own worth that you can help others recognize their potential without needing them to diminish your achievements. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's building something so magnificent that the people who doubted you become grateful to be part of it. Sometimes it's becoming so successful that your critics become your collaborators. Sometimes it's growing so confident in your own value that you can afford to forgive those who failed to see it earlier. That Christmas dinner where I sat empty-handed was the beginning of a journey that led to professional success, financial security, industry recognition, and family reconciliation. But more importantly, it was the beginning of a journey toward self-respect, authentic relationships, and the kind of life satisfaction that comes from knowing you've become the person you were always capable of being. The gift I gave myself that night wasn't revenge against people who'd excluded me. It was permission to build a life where exclusion was no longer possible, where my value was no longer debatable, and where my success could benefit everyone around me rather than threatening anyone's sense of importance. That's a gift worth giving, yourself, regardless of what anyone else thinks about it. That's a gift that keeps giving, long after the people who doubted you have become the people who depend on you. That's a gift that transforms not just your own life, but the lives of everyone fortunate enough to be part of the world you choose to build. The boy who was excluded from Christmas gifts became the man who signed Christmas bonuses. The family member who wasn't considered part of the business became the owner of the business. The son who was told he didn't contribute to the family legacy became the architect of a new family legacy that exceeded anything that came before, and, in the end, that transformation benefited everyone involved, including the people who never saw it coming. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.